Well, J.K. Dobbins had some pretty interesting things to say on Twitter on Thursday, putting out some cryptic messages about his future. We break down what it potentially means for Dobbins and his future with the Ravens and so much more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into a very special edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host here as always, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, and we're here as always on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here with us today and making us your first listen each and every day, free and available, all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube. You can subscribe for free, both in video form and audio form if you want 5 days a week. Ravens content. This is a super special episode for me here today, not just because I have former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver, Super Bowl champion Kadri Ismail here with me for another Purple Friday, but this is my 1000th episode of this show, going back to August of 2019. Never missed a show, 5 days a week, and I appreciate the applause cue if you're watching here on YouTube, where, look, it's a grind to do this 5 days a week, but it's a grind I've enjoyed and all the support I've gotten from those who listen, those who watch, and all the connections I've made. So I want to give a shout out to you, Q, and all of the guests I've had over the course of this journey, and it's a surreal moment for me. So I appreciate everything, and I'm glad to have you back here talking Ravens football again, Q. Welcome back to the show, my man.
I tell you what, this show, like what you do, how you do it, the technical stuff that goes into it, the way you handle it, the way in which you bring on a variety of guests for your listeners. Obviously, I've been very thankful to come on a daily, well, I should say a weekly. But that being said, the way in which, if you're a Ravens fan, you want to be in the know, you go to Kevin Oestreicher. And I think that's something where you look at the bigger picture. This is well deserved. 1,000 shows, and I hope it's 1,000 more, and just filled with a lot of awesome content for Ravens Nation, the flock, to be able to understand what's going on and the latest within the Ravens as an organization, and getting people ready for the offseason, for the draft, obviously for the preseason, and the most important, the regular season.
Yeah, that means the world to me, Q. I appreciate you so much. And, for everything that this team has put us through ever since 2019, we'll go into a trip down memory lane, the good and the bad in the final segment, talking about 2019, 2020, 2021, obviously last year too. But people who tune in, they're waiting for Ravens content. So let's dive into the Ravens content here. We'll start off with a pretty big storyline, I would say. J.K. Dobbins taking to Twitter, and we've seen over the course of the last couple of years players being somewhat transparent over Twitter. Lamar Jackson did that a couple months ago when he was talking about his contract situation. We've seen it from multiple different people. J.K. Dobbins took to Twitter, shared a couple of messages, cryptic messages at that, where it kind of came out of nowhere. It was not what I was expecting to see at, like 4 p.m. on a Thursday evening. But he ended up saying, Baltimore, #Ravens flock. I hope I'm here until the end of my career. I love you with a purple heart. And then he said, IDK though, sadly. Then in a tweet 2 minutes later said, I'm Baltimore to and through till I'm gone. In that little Baltimore accent, he typed it out there. So obviously, Q, he loves the city. He loves the organization. But a question that I know we have talked about, and a lot of people are kind of wondering, is what does the future hold for J.K. Dobbins after this year? We know running backs in general are it's a position now that's not highly valued at all. In fact, I think it is the least valued position in the NFL at this point. Dobbins it's been a very up and down career. Started it really well, led the entire league in terms of running backs and yards per carry in his rookie year, suffered the catastrophic injury in 2021, came back in 2022, had to have another little cleanup, but I thought looked still good. So this is a contract year for him. The Ravens historically don't pay running backs. So what were your initial reactions and thoughts when you saw these comments from Dobbins?
JK from the very beginning showed this interesting skill set. With a Greg Roman offense, the running back is a featured guy. He had running back by committee, but you were seeing a guy who, when it came to running, when it came to his overall performance, he was always falling forward, and it seemed at minimum he was getting 4 yards, 5 yards a carry, just minimum, like ho hum. And it was the most ho hum running that I've seen. And I think against the Cincinnati Bengals at Cincinnati, towards the end of the year is where we saw this big run down the sideline. Uh, that was the first gallop of a J.K. Dobbins type of wow, this kid can run. He got some speed. He got some wheels. And I think from the bigger picture of it all, J.K. he's not gonna wow you with this Adrian Peterson type of a running style or a LaDainian Tomlinson running style. But I think ultimately, when you look at it, like he is a extremely productive guy. And then comes the injury element of it all. But the negotiation part of it is showing, hey, here's who I am. And who I am when I'm healthy, I'm not going to be flashy. I'm just good. And I get the job done. And what can you say? I mean, he does. He gets the job done. But at the same time, it comes a time for pay and a time for play. And I think right now we're seeing a time for, pay mixed in a little bit with the time for play because it's still the off season. But yeah, 1.3 million for his style, and yeah, with his uh, injury history, I think he has to be careful. I think it's a scenario where you don't want to just take me for granted and think I'll play for 1.3 million. But on the flip side of it, it's well, yeah, but you did miss a season. You weren't, 1,000-yard back. You didn't carry the team, if you will. And then that's where again, I guess you can come back and you fired your offensive coordinator because you knew that he wasn't really truly featuring me. He was featuring Lamar. And now this running game is going to be predicated on a running back. And Lamar is more of a luxury that we have. So that's the back and forth. But the Twitter comments and everything, I think that's par for the course. That's the new wave. That's the Draymond Green, the new media, guys want to express themselves whether cryptically or out in the open, and they're going to do it. And I think GMs and teams are going to have to get used to it. But we as the fans, we got to sit back and hold on because here we go again.
Yeah, and it's interesting just the timing of everything because I think with like for example, with Lamar Jackson's comments, the trade request, right as John Harbaugh sat down at the owners' meetings and everyone said, "Oh, that was so calculated." And of course, like right as John Harbaugh was sitting down, what do you think about the timing of this cue? Was there something that you think might have happened? Were there any talks? And J.K. Dobbins might have said, I thought that these talks were going to go better early on, or was it just J.K. Dobbins, as you talked about, kind of taking to Twitter, expressing emotions in a new media age where players now have the ability to do that and just kind of share what they're feeling whenever they want to?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. I'll share when I want to. I think it is. I'm going to express my thoughts. Unlike my day, where you dare not say anything because if you did, then it could turn your negotiations the wrong way. Or you know, when you got leverage, you use it for whether it be a sheesh comment from Patrick Queen, whether it be scrubbing your entire everything of Arizona Cardinal, if you're Kyler Murray, to JK voicing his opinion, Lamar clearly doing what he did strategically and tactically. Roquan Smith said it when my colleague uh, Mark Viviano was saying, or asked him, what is it about, today's players, and what would you tell them as far as, going to the negotiation table? And he was like, well, I think it's common. I think it'll be more common. I think, guys want to, be in a know. Like, what do you really do think about me? Guys we had instant access to how we were back then, but we didn't have instant, well, this is what we think of you access. Literally, as soon as if I'm on a away game, literally, as soon as I get on the plane, I can watch every play that I was in right on my pad. At the same time, when you look at the way in which you have information leaked or not leaked or said, it is right on your device and you can see exactly what happened or not happened. And I think all of that, in my mind, it comes down to the fact that you have, you know, the new media, meaning that guys are going to want to know what you feel about them. And if you feel some type of way about them, then you best believe they're going to be feeling some type of way about you. And that's that. I mean, it's here to stay.
Yeah, it's so interesting how it has shifted with the addition of technology evolving and social media evolving as well. And look, I think it's really great that players have a platform and they're able to say what they want to say and respond to fans. The engagement. Ravens players are really J.K. Dobbins is one who is really good at engaging with fans, and it gives the fans, I think, an inside view of players when they want. Players don't have to give that, where it is the choice. I know sometimes maybe not in some circumstances, which I still think is unfortunate. But to me, I think that for J.K. Dobbins and just the whole timing of this, it's interesting to think about it because there could be multiple reasons why this happened. But I would lean more towards maybe it's a little bit of just him thinking about, well, what is next for me after this year? Because Dobbins hasn't had the workload that I think he would potentially want to have so far throughout 3 years heading into year 4. So coming up, we'll keep talking about J.K. Dobbins in the second part of the show, talk about the timing of the tweets, and also what his future could hold with the Ravens after this year. So be sure to stay tuned. So a lot to dive into on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now, new customers are getting no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. And we are in NBA Finals mode right now. My Denver Nuggets taking on the Miami Heat. It's going to be a great series if you want to bet on Nikola Jokic or Jimmy Butler props or who's actually going to win. Do it over on FanDuel. They have great promotions every day. They have a safe and secure app, and you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action on America's #1 sports book. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. We're back. Our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Kaiser Ismail on my 1000th episode, which is a very special day for me here. And Q, for J.K. Dobbins, we'll continue that conversation again, him tweeting out a couple of cryptic messages about his future. And it's interesting because, again, the way running backs are valued now, it just seems like every year they are valued less and less and less. And we're starting to see less and less and less of these workhorse bell cow running backs. Like Derrick Henry has been run into the ground during his time in Tennessee. Saquon Barkley, and these guys are like, they're really good running backs, but there's still the question. Like for Austin Eckler, who's getting paid, I can't even remember his deal's like total of $24 million or something. Miles Sanders just signed a 3-year, $25 million deal. How do you think the Ravens are going to maneuver this potentially? Because we just saw Lamar Jackson get signed to a big time extension. I know that the cap money is not going to the cap hit is not going to fully be huge till a couple years down the line. But when it comes to keeping everybody, we saw it with Matthew Judon and Zadarius Smith a couple years ago. You just can't do it. Some guys have to walk because you just can't keep everybody. So is there any estimation in your mind, Q, that maybe they could work something out? J.K. Dobbins obviously said he wants to stay. He loves Baltimore, wants to be there to the end of his career. But again, the Ravens just historically don't pay running backs. And with the year I think J.K. Dobbins is going to have, albeit probably running potentially a little more in a less overall run-heavy offense, I think he's going to have a great year, and I think that could price himself out of Baltimore.
So I think the one thing, the Ravens have always found ways to keep people that they want. And so for every Jamal Lewis, yeah, you're right. There is a Priest Holmes. And when it comes to the fact that you have a guy who is so dynamic and just productive, I shouldn't say dynamic in a dynamic sense, like I said, but you cannot argue with his productivity when healthy. JK is that guy. And I think for him, it's reaching attainable incentives. If you give me something, because I think that's what also Austin Eckler wanted was just something that you're going to say, hey, we like you. Are they going to wife him? No, 24 million. But some incentive laden, easy, it's attainable things. That means that the team is doing well. We love you. You love us. Kumbaya. Off we go. But I think that's something that would be a model, if you will, when it comes to JK. And I think he's doing it at the right time. The draft is in a rearview mirror. Like, there's nobody really out there that you can just say we're just gonna pick up. And from a street free agent standpoint, those are slim pickings. Who's your boy? What is his name?
Devonta Freeman. Don't you forget that name. Don't
My
you
goodness.
forget that
I
name.
mean, I didn't know. But like they're, once they hit that wall, they're done. I mean, that's just the harsh reality of what life is like in the NFL when it comes to running backs. And so I think when you see the bigger picture, it's one of those scenarios where I think honestly, if he gets an incentive laden extension and give him some money, then more power to him.
Yeah, and I know, we were talking, Q, when Mark Ingram was with the team, and a lot of the conversation was, well, when running backs hit 30, that's when, that's the cutoff age. I think every year that age has gone down, where it's like, oh, well, 29, well, oh, but what about 28, 27? So even at this point, it's like so many teams, I think, would rather. I mean, you look at also just what the running backs of Super Bowl champs, Isaiah Pacheco, someone I know we've talked about, Q, a 7th round pick for the Chiefs. And then you continue to go back down that line, and there just aren't running backs on big contracts who were on those teams. So that is the new hot formula for what teams are looking at in terms of the position. But this Ravens team, Q, was just different. While the whole NFL kind of zigged to going, oh, we're going to air the ball out, we're going to throw it 30, 40 times a game, the Ravens zagged in the other direction and said, we're going to run the ball 30, 40 times a game. And it worked for him to an extent. Then Lamar Jackson, obviously, his comments saying running can only take you so far. So I think that was a very interesting perspective on it. I tend to kind of agree with him. But at the end of the day, for the Ravens, they're now moving into we're going to throw the ball a little more than we did in the past type of offense with Odell in the fold now, with Zay Flowers in the fold now. J.K. Dobbins, I mentioned it earlier, his workload, I don't think, has been up to what I think he would potentially like it to be. Only 4 games of 15 carries, and then one of those games was where he had more than 15 carries, 17 in the last game of the regular season. So 3 15-carry games, 1 17-carry game. Gus Edwards is one heck of a running back too. I like the 1-2 punch that they have, but I think this year what I believe will happen is we'll see Dobbins more of an established number 1 option. Edwards is the guy behind him while still sharing some sort of workload. What do you kind of expect for how the Ravens are going to use Dobbins with the shift now from Greg Roman to Todd Monken?
Well, I think the back out of the backfield option will be more prevalent. I think the idea of we have Lamar Jackson, we don't necessarily need to worry about an outlet because he is our outlet. And that was the G Rowe kind of mindset. So I think now, you would probably see more of it featured. So I think that's the difference. But I think the running game, you spread teams out, it'll be I'll be interested to get a feel and a hold of the exact scheme, whether it's inside zone they're going to hang their hat on, or outside zone they're going to hang their hat on. I know Greg Roman had multiple looks, whether it be big on big, whether it be just zone block schemes, whether it be angle. A lot of G power kind of started jumping in to mix something fierce. So that was interesting. Where you pull the guard, or in this particular case, you pull the guard and the tackle, and you blocking down with the center. But I think there's a lot there when it comes to just the details of the scheme of running with Monken, because we just don't know. We know there's going to be a lot more passing, but there's only a handful of running plays. You can get to them a multiple ways. Don't get me wrong, with different personnels and different formations, but there's only but so many ways you can skin a cat, if you will. So I'll be interested to see what he actually keeps from the success of Greg Roman's offense and how he molds it into his.
Yeah, and we heard John Harbaugh talk about, when Roman got fired, when Monken got brought in, the fact that they are going to keep some of what Roman did, both in the run game and in the pass game. He made that clear. So how much remains to be seen, but I'm excited for Todd Monken there. But Q, the Ravens, they are continuing their OTAs. J.K. Dobbins not there, but Mark Andrews showed up, and Patrick Queen as well has been there. And Andrews, he was asked about a lot of stuff. He was asked about the Lamar extension. He was like, just thank God, man. Like the relief you could see in his face. And he was pounding
Yeah,
the table for Lamar to get that deal. He really wanted him there.
yeah.
They're both really close. So I'm glad for Mark Andrews, obviously for Lamar too, but glad for Mark Andrews. He doesn't have to worry about that. Just like we don't have to worry about it anymore, Q. But then Patrick Queen had some interesting comments. Obviously his future, just like J.K. Dobbins in that 2020 draft class, up in the air, the 5th-year option declined. And when asked about the option being declined, he said it was a blessing in disguise. And he said, you see guys go both sides of that and get paid either way. So he's focused on being the best teammate he can be, the best player he can be, improving himself. So he's a competitive player, plays with the chip on his shoulder, talked about, scrubbing his social media too, and had a very mature answer in terms of, figuring stuff out, talking to people. And I think he has a much healthier mindset now about that. So with Patrick Queen, Q, it's a very interesting conversation. I know we've had it, but where are you on him right now going into the year, and then what his future could hold as well?
Well, I think part of that maturity is that the game is slowed down. It's a meritocracy like no other league. Sure, the organization will have its favorites and maybe slide one way or another. But if you can play, you're gonna get paid. Teams will pay you, and there's always ways to move around the salary cap. We're seeing it, with the Ravens, with their void years and them, trying to maneuver things with their salary cap. Uh, but that's the reality. And now the maturity is okay. I got to go out there and I got to play. I got to produce. Man, you want me to be the best I can be? I want to be the best I can be. If I'm the best I can be, then that means pretty much let me go ahead and make some tackles and or cause turnovers and or sack the quarterback and or get interceptions. Like, bruh, now this is where next level comes in, and next level just simply means like you're on not only the Ravens radar, but you're on other teams' radars. So yeah, Matthew Judon, he played so well that they were like, man, what are we gonna do? Well, he's up in New England right now, and he's one of their stalwarts and holding it down. I'm not saying that for Patrick Queen. I'm not saying that he's not going to be here, but I am saying that regardless, it's professional football. It's a business. You produce, you will get paid, whether you in purple or in another uniform.
Yep, 100% agree. And he's right. I mean, people do either have their option declined or option accepted, and they do get paid because of the way they play in that final contract year, which is what I expect from him, whether it is in Baltimore or not. My early prediction is that it's not going to be, but we have a lot of time before that decision has to be made. Queen and Roquan Smith play so well next to each other. And even before Roquan got there, Queen was playing well. Obviously, Roquan elevated that to a whole nother level because I think that's just, the way they mesh together. But I think for Patrick Queen, I'm expecting a big year, and we will see how the Ravens handle both the Queen and Dobbins situations. But coming up, we'll take a trip down memory lane, talking a bit about that 2019 season and also all the years leading up to now and what this team could be compared to those. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. We're back, rounding out my 1000th episode of Locked On Ravens here on Purple Friday with Kadri Ismail. I am still Kevin Ostreicher, and Q, again, just reflecting on all that has happened since 2019. I don't want to just go like a full 10, 12, however many minutes of me talking about just the show. So I want to incorporate, your perspective on what happened during each of those seasons. So I started the show in August 2019, just a little bit of a background. Did the first episode literally sitting on a bed, no mic, no lights. We weren't doing video at this point. We did video starting in 2021, had no setup whatsoever. And I said, I was very monotone. I said, welcome back to another episode of it was very monotone. And I listened back to it and I said, how could people listen to me? Where was the energy? Yeah. So I'm glad that I have grown in terms of figuring out how with the inflections, the inflections in the voice are very important. But my first episode was about Marquise Brown in training camp and him flying down the field. And that year, there were a lot of questions about, well, Lamar just, in the games he started during his rookie season, played really well. That they were coming off of that wild card loss to the Chargers. And the questions were, well, how was Lamar going to perform? What was he going to be? That team was incredible, 14-2. Obviously, didn't the regular season was great. The playoffs were not, to keep it short, but that year was just, it was great to cover that, being my first year covering the team in this capacity, in the podcast capacity. But I want to know what you remember from that 2019 team, a team that I don't think many people expected to do as well as it did in the regular season.
Well, honestly, like the biggest thing I remember is just that they were just, it is so hard to score. And the teams like the Kansas City Chiefs, or gosh, Peyton Manning in his Denver years, even in some of his Colts years, Tom Brady in multiple years in New England. Obviously, what we saw with Drew Brees down in New Orleans, like every time they are scoring in the red zone, and I just felt like you got to be like one of those special teams if you can do that. You got to have special players, and I think for what I saw with Lamar and right off the bat with Miami, my God, it was perfect. It was like these guys, like they are just scoring machines. That was the biggest, like, just it stood out in my mind. Like it just doesn't matter. They're sustained drives. They don't end in 3. They don't end in, I think Justin Tucker probably was so bored that year. Like,
So was
okay,
Sam Cook. Sam Cook barely punted the ball that year.
yup. I mean, goodness gracious. But it was phenomenal to feel and to experience as a player. Well, I
Yeah.
should say as a
Well,
fan, excuse me.
yeah.
I'm going back to my playing days. But it was really good to see and feel, because when it came down to it, you were like thoroughly entertained. I mean, that was just that's what stood out. It was like, man, y'all in the red zone again, y'all scored. Wow, y'all in the red zone again, y'all scored. Man, y'all drove it. Oh my God, y'all still driving down the field. There was like it was not a thing to have it, third and whatever. Like it doesn't matter. And like I don't think people realize how hard it is to convert third downs, and they were just converting third downs. Like it was like, yeah, we're gonna convert third down. Yeah, okay, whatever. Complete football. Loved it. Loved every minute.
And it was an incredible run. I'm sad it ended the way it did. And I know there were plenty of conversations, some pretty toxic, about whether the Ravens should have rested their starters in that Pittsburgh game. The Ravens decided to rest them instead of play them. And there's the whole conversation about, well, rust over rest or anything like that.
I
But
remember.
that team, it was a great run, historic in so many ways. But then you move on to 2020, and that was, well, now the Ravens Q, they love to beat the underdogs. They're a team that thrives with that. 2020, they had the target on their back because they were the most dominant regular season team. Obviously, playoffs didn't go the way they wanted to that year, but that was Lamar's coming out party. All of a sudden, everybody, whoa, Lamar's the second unanimous MVP in NFL history. Only Tom Brady achieved that feat. So now it's, well, how does he respond to that? And I think it took a while for them to find their identity. I remember talking on multiple shows and kind of going through the whole situation of, well, they ran the ball so well last year. They've run it well so far this year, but I think they were trying to almost force feed the passing, which, again, Lamar's a good passer, but I think they were trying to lean into it too much, to the point where it just wasn't working when the run game was. We saw at the end of that year, when they started to actually feed into their running identity a bit more, they ran for 200 yards a game. And that Cincinnati game you talked about at the end of 2020 with J.K. Dobbins, that was the game where he stiff-armed Jermaine Pratt, who was talking all the mess about, oh, well, we're going to stop him from making the playoffs. And J.K. Dobbins said, no, you are not, sir, and stiff-armed him to the ground. That year, though, there was, a bunch of different crazy things with all of the different situations. And then, unfortunately for them, their season ended in a not so great way. Lamar ends up losing to Buffalo, gets concussed. They get over the hump of Tennessee, but in the wild card round at least. But then they lose to Buffalo. So that year, I think, was a step. But I think some people, I think, expected more that year.
I remember going to Philly and watching them. I remember going to watch them at the Commanders, and I remember like just the surreal feeling of going to those stadiums and them not being full at all. and having to like have special lines where you can be, but you can't cross over the line. Somehow the germ knows that you're on that line, and the germ knows that they're on that line, and I'm not gonna cross over on that line, but you got COVID. And like it was just so hilarious. But you know, the Commanders game was where I felt it wasn't that Lamar couldn't do it. It's just that he wasn't on the same page with his receivers, and he was like trying to get on the same page with Miles Boykin, and they were giving him, some burn. Like they was like, "Yo, bro, this is your time. You're about to do this," and it just never materialized. I don't think it was necessarily force feeding or, tripping out on Lamar like that he couldn't do it. I think it was I don't think I know. It was the fact that none of his receivers could do it. Not on a consistent basis. Every now and then you would see Hollywood, but it just Miles Boykin to me was the beginning of the end when it came to the Commanders game and just seeing how the season was going to go, throwing outside the numbers, and that's where I thought the rise of Mark Andrews just like it's done. It's over. He's a guy. He's gonna be my guy, and we're gonna ride on this. And I think subconsciously, any quarterback will tell you, like, yeah, give me a guy who keeps catching the ball, being reliable, and catches them in some tight window throws, which he had. Well, subconsciously, I'm just gonna try to find him, and then the film is going to show that, and then the coordinator is going to keep calling it. So it just shifted. You're right. It shifted into a inside the hash, tight end dominant passing attack, to the point where in Buffalo, he forced it into I forget the defender's name, but he was looking right at Mark Andrews, and the defender just like you could see right in the red zone where they normally would score, and he just floated right on over it. Boom, picked it off, and it just went down the field for the seal of the game. I think that season was a receiving core setback for Lamar, and the playoff game was a huge disappointment because they had that Buffalo game. Their defense was playing strong and solid until the interception, and as you said, you had the weirdness of the snap. I mean, I think center was the weirdest position, and I think at the same time, that's where the pressure of the defense and the wild snap. You look at the New England game, you look at that game; those are two wild snaps that cost them the game.
Yep, and it's crazy because the play before, the play before the pick six was a play where Marquise Brown was wide open going, across the right side of the field to the left, and Tyree Phillips and J.K. Dobbins whiffed a block so badly, 2 blocks in consecutive sessions so badly that Lamar could not get the throw there, and then the pick. So it's literally just like in the Cincinnati game last season, Q, with the wild card, a 14-point swing in that situation, which is just so unfortunate. But let's group 2021 and 2022 together, because honestly, some mirror does happen when you talk about those two teams. Now, the difference is that 2021 was just brutally, I guess, brutalized by injuries. Starting off, people forget LJ Fort was the first that year in terms of season-ending ACL, but then it ended up being J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Marcus Peters, and just guys kept going down. Guys would miss a game. Guys would miss 4 games. Guys would miss the year, and it just did not get better. Lamar Jackson got hurt against Cleveland. That team did not make the playoffs, and a year that had such high expectations just fell so flat due to reasons that just were so unfortunate. And then 2022 was a year, new defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald, inconsistencies as we talked about early in the year. They lost a bunch of close games. Lamar gets injured. They managed to sneak into the playoffs, but lose to Cincinnati in a game that honestly, I think they should have won based off how the game played, that 14-point swing. But those 2 seasons, you covering them, were so interesting because of the expectations that Baltimore had, and then just what got in the way for them. So what'd you think about those 2 years?
The biggest thing I think is the F-, and I when you started seeing those injuries pile up, and knowing what I know about my missile training facility, my way in which I have, acquired understanding, and then from that understanding, understand the non-contact injury, the understanding of, the way you train, it's going to either help or hurt you. And I just think that was years of dodging bullets, but we saw F minus in, what is it, 2015, I believe, right? But it reared its ugly head again. F minus is just it's sickening to me because, yeah, you do a phenomenal job. I'm not trying to compare, but the way in which the window of opportunity to achieve a level of greatness for a person making it in the league, it's so finite. You can grow and mature into this, like from going to your bed to hardly saying anything, to if you wanted new lights, to technology of backgrounds and all the things, and you can just keep getting better. Whereas when someone just in saying they're getting you better really is hurting you, and once that window closes, the next person is right there to take your spot. That's what frustrates me, and that's what brings my passion out. And that whole season, 2021 was just ticked me off. It was like, my God, man, it's just F minus all over the place, and no one wanted to take the fullness of responsibility until it was too little, too late.
Yeah, for those who don't know what Q's talking about, Steve Saunders is the F minus that he keeps putting out there. And honestly, he should have been let go a couple years prior to when he actually was. In 2022, I don't think we saw the same extent of injuries, but Rashad Bateman goes down, Devin Duvernay goes down, obviously Lamar goes down as well, and a bunch of other guys. Michael Pierce was a very big loss for them, and every team goes through injuries. 2022 was not nearly the year 2021 was in terms of injuries. Baltimore made all of these adjustments, moving practices from the morning to the afternoon and trying to figure out, well, what is it? What is it? I think what it was for the most part was the guy in the building in Steve Saunders, who the players, as we saw in that survey, did not really have a lot of love for. So I think now moving to 2023, Q, it's an exciting year for them. I think now they have revamped this offense, revamped this wide receiver room. Obviously, Todd Monken in there as well. The defense, another year under Mike McDonald, is huge. And I'm excited to see how it all plays out for him. But I appreciate you hopping on, Q. Thank you for joining me on a very special 1000th episode for me. I'm glad I could share it here with you and to 1,000 more. As you said, I'm excited to keep diving into Ravens content with you and looking forward to another great run with you and hopefully for a long time to come.
Well, I tell you what, again, you just continue to push the envelope in showing your greatness. And I think that's where, you don't sustain if you're not good. So clearly kudos to you, and continue to work on those vocals because, got to get them better.
Voice inflection is the key, but I appreciate you, Q. Thank you again. And thank you for tuning into Locked On Ravens, whether this is your first time tuning in the channel or you've been in every day or rocking out with me since 2019 or somewhere in between. This might be your second or third or maybe fourth show. I appreciate everyone who has listened, watched, and I'm glad to continue on this journey with you as we talk Ravens football and hopefully talk about a Super Bowl team in either this year or the near future. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to get back here on Monday. More Ravens content with a new look. So be sure to stay tuned for that. I'll see you right back here on Monday.